Paraphore is an open-world text-based div game primarily focused on exploration. The game has a story, or rather it has a lot of stories. But a bit unique is that these stories aren't told to you. Instead, some of them are almost hidden. And it's up to the player not only to learn about these stories, but in some cases also to interact with them. That is the best way I can summarize Paraphore, but luckily for me I don't have to summarize Paraphore, because Paraphore is what this entire video is about. Now let's get into the details about what exactly Paraphore does and how it does it. Probably one of the game's best strengths is how good the game is at utilizing characters. Paraphore has a lot of characters, and they're all really well integrated into the world. All the characters have lives, reputations, relationships with other characters, and they actively impact the world even when the player isn't looking. Let me give you an example of this. When exploring Junk City, you can run into a hippie deer girl who offers to tell you random advice and ideas for money. Merely by existing, she passively fleshes out Junk City. If an encounter like this is normal, that means there's probably also people of other subcultures in town. And if someone is selling something as specific as advice, then there's probably people in this town that buy and sell everything. If we pay her for some thoughts, one of the things we can learn from her is that she doesn't like harming anyone, and especially not animals. In another completely unrelated scene in Junk City, the player goes to a restaurant, and in this scene we hear the restaurant owner talking about a recent ban on animal consumption. And would you know it, among the people that have been asking for a law like this is a certain hippie deer along with another character called Kemp. Based on what the restaurant owner says, Kemp and the hippie deer should be the big people behind this. So there's a pretty decent chance these two characters know each other, right? Well, this Kemp character is also someone we can meet in the game. And if we talk with him in the crash and burn scene, then we get confirmation that indeed he does know our hippie deer. It's worth pointing out that Hippie Deer is a background character, she doesn't even have a name. And despite that we can't even interact with her outside of the random encounter in Junk City, she is still an active part of the world. She has relations to other characters, she impacts the game world. And the reason I used a background character to make this point is to show you that the game doesn't just treat its major characters like this, it treats everyone like this. The more you play the game, the more you begin to notice how many characters you can recognize from elsewhere. The more you can begin to put together how all these characters have lives and relations to one another. Something as menial as going to the bank can become interesting, because the girl behind the counter is the same girl you face fucked out in the forest just a little while ago. Okay, so the characters are used well, but who are they all? To avoid spoiling anything, I'll just say that there's an important theme in Paraphore of children versus parents. And inspired by that theme, I like to imagine the digital island from Paraphore as a nation of children. Many of the characters in Paraphore have pretty clear parallels to real-world cultures that are typically associated with young people, such as Kemp and Hippie Deer who are hippies, Lana and John who are nerds, or a certain late-game character called Septrica who is straight out of a cyberpunk story. Issues such as lack of identity, insecurity, self-centeredness, drug abuse and depression, which are also typically associated with teens, are present pretty much everywhere in Paraphore. I think there's something really contemporary about Paraphore's world, both in the meta and self-aware way that it's written, but also in the conflicts. This world where the characters aren't struggling to survive, but instead they're struggling to find meaning in their existence. I hope this gives you a basic idea about the themes in Paraphore's world. I want to leave the details out because they're way more fun if you discover them for yourself. But I will say Paraphore is so competent with its characters that it can not only write interesting characters, it can also use those characters to explore philosophical topics and show you multiple different answers to the same question, such as whether the characters in the game are real. Paraphore has a central plot, but it never pushes you in that direction. In fact, in the beginning of the game, you just sort of stumble around in the dark until you find a clue. And even then, clues don't always lead to more clues. You progress by just playing, by learning about the world and talking to the characters. Mystery is very central to Paraphore, and I think it goes beyond just the mystery of figuring out the plot. The game almost fetishizes mystery, from the cryptic code to the eerie title screen to the almost self-parodying way the game narrates, and the fact that there's even some questions that Paraphore never answers. Mystery is always a part of the game. The very first thing the game does when you click start is opening up mysteries. The first few lines of the game is, Mew, Arky, oh, a new player, we've been lonely in here. Immediately the game raises questions such as, who is Arky? Are there other players? Who are we and why have they been lonely? And from there, it's up to us. We get to choose what questions we seek out answers to and where we start looking. And for every answer we find, 3 more questions pop up, meaning that even if we feel lost, we never feel restless. The best way I can describe the mystique is like this. There's a part of creepypasta culture where stories are written by a collective of people. It usually starts with someone writing a proposal, a basic concept on 4chan, and then suddenly other people join in. They share their experiences with this phenomenon, and before you know it, there's a whole bunch of people posting fake footage on YouTube and theorizing together. A passerby might question, is this stuff legit? But what's actually going on is a collective roleplay. Everyone knows this is just a fantasy, but there's a silent agreement between people to pretend that it's not, because it's really fun. Pretending there's something strange going on, gathering a community which is trying to make sense of something they weren't even supposed to see, it's thrilling. And that's the feeling Paraphore evokes. Of course, Paraphore also has a lot of interesting places and characters, but this mystique is also a big part of what makes Paraphore into what it is. Para probably has the most satisfying UI I have seen in a YIF game. All the buttons look clean and pretty and has little animations that look super satisfying. There's ambience and everything has little noises. The interface feels so fucking good. And to make everything better, it's even customizable. There's a bunch of pretty skins and then there's the stranger skin. You can fully equip these skins or mix them together if you want. They're also naturally integrated into the game world, so characters might give you a skin or you might find a skin by exploring a certain area. This means skins can also work as a way to remember the adventures you've had. You can sport a skin that your favorite character gave to you, or maybe you can jury rig together a bunch of skins from all the areas you've been to. Or if you're boring like me, you can also wear the Taro skin because it looks so fucking good. Or if you don't have an eye infection but you want to know what it's like, you can also wear the stranger skin. Because the stranger skin is so pretty it makes Discord light mode look like Mona Lisa. Paraphore features a bunch of different YIF content. It's hard to say anything about the porn part of the game in general because all the scenes are so vastly different. Some scenes have a very soft feel to them. Whoring by the fireside is a good example of this. Not only the content but also the way the scene is written has a lot of gentle attitude. It's almost wholesome to read. And then other scenes like the power of teamwork has a far more rough and rude attitude. Some scenes do something completely different, like Mustard Stain's scene with the seagull girl, where the scene instead had a competitive feel to it. And then some scenes also mix lore or character building together with the porn. The kinks get just as wide around. There's various degrees of pretty much everything. There's certainly more of some kinks than others, but there's at least a little bit of representation from almost everything. Even some of the more obscure stuff like unbirthing, prolapse, living toilet, living ashtray, orientation play, candy gore, food play, and vomit. The most reoccurring kinks I feel is water sports, cup, and pregnancy. There's also a lot of snuff, but it's this gay variant where the characters just respawn afterwards, and that really takes the fun out of it for me. There's barely any vor in Para. I think that's the most underrepresented kink considering how big it is. Otherwise, I think it's only some of the really obscure kinks like plastification that Para is missing. But you'd be surprised how much different shit they managed to squeeze into Para. I think it's fitting that when Para is such an exploration focused game, and since the sex encounters are also scenes that you stumble into along the way, Para also works great for exploring new kinks. I know some peeps just play Para for the story. I had most fun with Para when I started sessions with just exploring and learning about the world, and then I could always whip my dick out whenever I found an interesting sex encounter. A cool feature is that you can always replay scenes that you've already found. So if you skipped a scene previously but you wanted to try it out anyway, or maybe you wanted to try a different route, and then you can replay pretty much everything using the Daydream Journal, which you find pretty early in the game. Last little thing I wanted to mention about the sex content in Para. Para has a really smart little kink icon system, which warns you whenever anything sex related is about to happen. This way you can easily navigate around kinks that you don't like. This is probably the smartest, most convenient way I've seen something like this implemented. It was a little inconsistent sometimes, not much, but say maybe you had a scene that had a water sports warning, but water sports is only an optional path in that scene, so you're not always sure what's mandatory in a scene and what's just optional in it. And then other times you might find an optional path which was not advertised at all. A little nitpicky, I know, but still. I don't think Paraphore is perfect, but it still does things that I've seen no other GIF game pull off. Originally, I was going to have a segment in this video where I also critiqued Para, especially with focus on a character called Murray, but that part ended up getting really long and kinda spoilerish, so I decided to just give it its own video, which will probably be up really soon. That said, I still think all the good in Paraphore outweighs the bad, and I hope this video could give some insight into how and why. I would absolutely recommend Paraphore to anyone who would be willing to give it a chance. It takes a little while to properly get into it, but once you get hooked on the chains of mystery and the characters, it's a fantastic game to explore. That's all I had to say about Paraphore. Eat your vegetables.